Ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed to our next speaker. But before that, let me introduce him first. He is an innovation expert and a master inventor with over 50 patents to his names, and after an illustrious career with Procter & Gamble for 21 years. He and his team of experts are now providing innovation coaching to P&G and other corporate clients. Besides having his qualifications and degrees in marketing, retailing, and management, he has also done extensive work in economic modeling, knowledge management, and decisions. Okay? And AI, artificial intelligence, neural knowledge systems, product designs and engineering, and also a trainer and practitioner of statistical quality control, quality functional deployment at P&G Technical Engineering School. The company he co-founded comprises of talented individuals, and their methodologies are not just high-level theory, but incorporate 60 years of combined experience spanning every aspect of product development. With over 150 US and international patents to their credit, they are well placed to help you in moving from idea to execution, applying leading-edge knowledge systems to turn your creative concept into marketable products. Reading his CV makes me breathless, actually. So let me welcome Mr. Sandy Ping, Chief Executive Officer, Venture Forward USA. Please welcome.
Thank you.
Sorry, because I was breathless reading your long resume.
Sorry. First of all, let me see if this mic is working. We have this, okay, good, thank you. I prefer not to stand behind the podium. So, and listening to most of your talks today, mine might be a little different because I'm going to talk about actual innovation and actual work that we do. A little more background. I think of myself as a innovation systems engineer. And I spend my time trying to figure out how to put systems together that will improve the probability of successful projects in the market. Over the years, I've had many successes and failures, but I've worked to improve the overall process and how it works. I also have a knowledge engineering certificate, and there's a lot of, I'll talk about it later, but there seems to be some relationship between knowledge and innovation and the way you put those two things together. And I think she mentioned everything else there, so I'll skip past that. I'm best known for being able to develop many different products that have been successful in the marketplace. These are a few of the ones that I've been successful on. We're going to talk about one of my failures a little later, but the one I'm best known for in the United States, and I don't think any of these products are actually sold in Malaysia. So if anybody recognizes any of these, and Ariel maybe? All right. The most recent, the one I'm most famous for is the one on top there, and I'm going to tell you a story about that in a little bit, but it was called Swiffer WetJet. It literally revolutionized the way people clean their floors in the US. And the most recent one is this one at the bottom. It's called Cascade Action Packs, and it looks like a packet, but it's in a dissolvable film, and so when the powder goes into solution, it immediately opens up. So it's a quick release powder instead of a compressed powder. It also has liquid built in, so it actually has controlled release into the, in this case, a dishwasher, but it could be used in other applications. Some of the ones that people don't think of as innovations is the one with the, in the center there with the little pour spout on top of a carton. Most people wouldn't think of that as a very big deal, but in the orange juice business, and do you have this in Malaysia where you have that spout on the side? Well, the work that I worked on was we determined that would be a good idea, but our management really didn't want to do it. Okay, it cost a nickel to put that on there. Okay, and they didn't want to spend the nickel. But when we ran the research, what we found was that it was actually going to be worth 50 cents to the consumer. What we didn't know was once we put it on the container, we could never take it off. okay? People won't buy orange juice without that on it. So if anybody were to eliminate it, they would lose their entire business. So you spend a nickel, but you can't get rid of it. Anyway, I could go on and on about other inventions, but those are some of the ones that I was famous for. What I'm going to talk to you today about is really about my 30 years plus of experience. I want to talk about some of the successes I've had and some of the failures I've had, and the differences between the success and failure, and try to give you a way to compare. And then, we want to talk about how projects are run currently, and maybe we can identify what the problems might be with the way projects currently operate. And I'm going to try to give you a systems engineering approach on how you might want to think about those projects. And then we'll have a discussion about what's next, and then we'll have some questions and answers at the end. So first of all, we've had a lot of discussion today about, well, what is innovation? And Steve Jobs, I think this is one of the better quotes that I've seen, and it's really, innovation is the process through which enterprises create and transform new knowledge and technology into new products, services, and processes for the market you wish to serve. So basically, it's got to be useful in the market. Otherwise, we don't consider it an innovation. There are a lot of ideas. People come up with many creative things, but very rarely do they come up with something that people really want to buy. So my definition of innovation is what drives market success. Now, also, why is innovation important? And for what this conference is about, I actually pulled this slide actually from a U.S. study. The U.S. studied 2 years about, well, why was innovation important? And these were the main points that they came up in the report that was produced for what they call the Council on Competitiveness. But really, it's the productivity and the economic growth of your country. It's meeting the social needs and improving your overall standard of living. And it's creating a national global markets. It's wealth creation, definitely jobs. We're trying to get more and more people employed with better jobs. And you give yourself some sort of a comparative advantage so you can compare yourself against other countries. And just overall, a higher standard of living. Now, on the negative side of innovation, one of the problems is that it doesn't work very often. And when you look at inventions, okay, we'll find that only about less than 80% ever reach the market. So I like to show a slide sometimes about the U.S. Patent Office, but right now in the U.S. we have about 7 million patents, and less than 20% actually ever make it to the market. But of the ones that actually make it to the market, about 80% of those actually end up failing. And the ones that actually that have gotten there, 90% were delivered late. They were over budget, and they weren't the quality that anyone expected. And the probability of overall success of a new product is about 1%. And we were talking at lunch earlier today, and I know there's some research here in Malaysia that you've seen as much as 4%. So there's a little variation around that. But so people look at that number and they say, oh, that's bad. So you actually have done very good here. So it supports your number. And then the probability of having one person have more than one innovation, it comes out to be less. It's 1 in 10,000. So it's actually kind of a rare occurrence. Now, the problem is even worse, and this is a slide I used from a guy named Jeffrey Moore. He writes the book called Crossing the Chasm, and this is a way to explain how ideas move through the market. And usually we start off with the leading edge innovators, and that would be one of me. I'm not one of those leading edge people. Eventually people pick up these ideas, and those are the early adapters. And then you move into the early majority. Those are the first people to buy your product. You take off, and you finally reach the what we call Main Street at the top. You have kind of a whirlwind growth, and then you have Main Street at the top, and then you start to decline. You get the late majority, we call them the laggers, and the last people to buy that, we call them the fossils. If you ever thought, does everybody here have a cell phone? Everybody has one? Do we have anyone in the room that doesn't have a cell phone? Okay. So there's no fossils here, okay? But if you remember when, it's a recent invention that most of you are aware of, but not a lot of people bought them at first. A lot of people thought it was a kind of a weird technology, wasn't going to go anywhere, but now it's completely accepted. So yeah, the cell phone is already at the late stage. You know, I'm going to continue to go on the negative a little bit. I pulled on some research on just projects in general, and I got this from the Standish Group, and they actually look at, in this case, IT and technical projects to find out how successful they are, and they find that only about 16% of those projects are actually successful, and 31% are, well, we'll call them partially successful, but 53% are actually outright failures. And then what we, you know, when you look at the planning, you find out, well, they didn't have realistic planning in the beginning, and really we would call there was really no, it didn't really exist. Most people start doing things before they ever have a plan, is what we've learned. And then they also tend to be over budget, okay, and over time. And the real problem here is the cost. You know, if you look at it on a yearly basis, we're talking about $8.1 billion. That's in U.S. dollars. So you multiply that times 3 for Malaysia, and about $59 billion in cost overruns. So you know that's the kind of cost we have in the U.S. And then we have the project requirements. They're also failures, and 31% of the time they just didn't meet the stakeholder requirements. So it wasn't even close to what they wanted. So what I thought I'd do is talk about some real projects that I've worked on, and then we'll do a little comparison. So this is actually one of my favorite slides. The guy in the middle was my old CEO. He used to yell at us, you know, where's that innovation? And of course, this was the answer, and that we always gave him. So, you know, where do you want it, sir? We'll give you whatever you want. So the first one I was going to tell you about here is this was actually my first invention, okay? And it actually did make it to the market, and it didn't succeed, and I'll get into that. But I want to tell you the story about how it came to be. So think back. This is back in about 1982. I was new with this at this time, Procter & Gamble. I didn't have. I was new with the company, so I didn't get a lot of vacation. I don't know if you get vacation here when you work with a company, but I didn't have a lot of vacation. So at Christmas time, I found myself in the office with no one there. Okay, everyone else went away. I was there doing, you know, trying to find something to do. And just before that vacation, we had a meeting with our senior vice president. His last name was Zaki. I remember it very well. And we had just showed him a new prototype of a new product that we had been working on for some time, and we were trying to coat this detergent booster on a sheet. And the problem was it kept falling off. No matter what you did to stick it on there, it kept falling off. And so we came to him and says, you know, sir, you need to stop trying to coat this stuff on a sheet because it keeps falling off. Why don't we just put it in a little pouch? And that would hold it, and then we could sell that to the market. And he went nuts. He said, no way, we're never going to do that here. We've had too many failures in the past with pouches, and at one time they had a thing called Salvo. I don't think it ever made it here, but it was a compressed tablet, and the problem with the compressed tablet was it didn't dissolve, so people ended up within their pockets and never even got their clothes clean. So anyway, left me there for my Christmas vacation. So for 2 weeks, I thought about, well, how might I solve this problem? Well, I went around in the labs and I started putting things together, and I decided I could take a piece of diaper material, and because Procter & Gamble makes a lot of diapers, okay, our nappies here, is that right? I took that and I put little pieces of powder in it, and then I found a way to seal the seals between them. And then I went to the art department and I put little stars on the top of each one of these little pouches, and I put it in I put my little sheets together. And when my boss came back from vacation, I showed him my sheet. I said, well, you know, here's my idea for what I thought we might do. My boss says, wow, that's a great idea. Okay, let's go talk to the director. So he runs off over to the director's office, and we show it to the director. Director says, wow, that's a great idea. And we run over to the vice president's office, and he says, wow, that's a great idea. And by the end of the day, it was on the CEO's desk. The CEO says, when can we go to market? They go, whoa, didn't expect that. And the CEO said, and they go, oh, well, 6 months, sir. Okay, and that started the craziest project in Procter & Gamble's history. We went, you know, they gave us all the resources we could ever imagine. We spent $30 million, which in 1982 was a lot of money. We basically started, you know, trying to figure out manufacturing systems, solving problems as they came up. We actually built, and I have a patent, well, that's one of my patents that got away. Almost got a patent on one on the fastest poucher ever built. It actually ran at 1,000 feet per minute. It actually did get patented. I didn't get my name on it. I learned a valuable lesson. In the end, after 2-3 years, a company called Colgate came out with a pouch, okay? And they said, well, throw your pouch in your wash. And then all of a sudden they pulled the plug on it because we had a competitive threat and they didn't want to run with this product. So the project just evaporated and went away. So that was my first project. It was actually, and it never did they did in the test market, but it never actually got to got all the way into a national product. And then I thought I'd tell you this most recent product is a thing called Swiffer WetJet. I don't know, do you guys still mop your floors here? Everybody mop their floors? You guys take a bucket, right? And you got to put some water in the bucket, and you got to put some sort of chemical, either a powder or a liquid, in the bucket, and stir it up pretty good. You get your mop out, and you put it on the floor, and you mop it around, and then you go put the bucket away, right? And let it wait for the floor to dry, right? Well, it turns out that Procter & Gamble had been in the business of making floor cleaners for quite some time, and they had a whole division called hard surface cleaners, and it was in its late stage. This has been around for, we've been, probably 50 years. Procter's a fairly old company. It's about 150 years old, but this business had been around for about 50 years. Really hadn't been any change at all at once, and they were looking for something as a breakthrough in that division. So they commissioned a PhD team in our R&D lab to go off and find out, well, how can we get floors cleaner, okay? Because obviously we got to do something to improve getting floors clean. So this PhDs worked hard for about a year, and they came back and they had this great report, and they they brought their report and they said, okay, here's the results. The secret of getting floors clean is get the dirt off the floor. And we went, huh? And it turns out that they were absolutely right. The process we were using to clean floors was just putting the water, spreading it around, and then leaving it to dry. And the problem was you weren't getting your floors clean because you were just leaving it on the floor. You got some of it up while you squeezed it and got in the bucket, but most of it was still there on the floor. So what can we do to get floors clean? Okay, so there was a team that went off and worked on trying to develop a new product, and they've been working on it again for another year, and weren't having a lot of success. And they were trying every other idea. They had actually hired an outside consulting firm, couldn't seem to get it to work. And my boss came to me and said, Sandy, there's a project over there in hard surface cleaners. I'd like you to go over there and work on it, and I want you to kill it nicely, okay? Go there, work for a couple of weeks, and just get rid of it, okay? And I went, okay. So I went on over to the hard surface cleaners, and I thought, well, how am I going to do this? Well, I'll form a multi-functional team, okay? I'll go get a team together. We'll go do some consumer testing pretty quick, and we'll get some results on what consumers think about this idea. And then, so we did that, and then we organized it and put it into some hierarchy so we could begin to understand. So well, then let's put the team together on how we might deliver this. And we ended up building a model on how this thing might go together. And it was agony. These people hated it. And we couldn't work on that. We could only work for 2 hours a day. It took us about 2 weeks to get through it, but we We just kept working on it until we came up with an idea. And then we said, well, that's a pretty good idea. Let's go test it. So somebody had the idea, said, well, why don't we go make a commercial? Since we really didn't know how to make this thing yet. It didn't exist, it's just an idea in our head. We said, let's go make a commercial. So we got some money, the company gave us some money. We went off and hired a little ad company to do a commercial for us. And we took a model, a woman, and we gave her a prototype mop that we made out of wood. We had a hose that we ran up her leg and around her shoulder and down her arm, and then went down the mop. And every time that we were going to spray water on the floor, my assistant back behind would push on a syringe and the water would come out. Okay, and that's how we made our first prototype. We took that video and we sent it to management. We sent everyone on the upper floors this commercial that we had developed, and then we went to get money, and they gave us $2 million. They said, go build a prototype. Okay, so we decided to put it into a consumer test, and in the consumer test, what we found was we got our results back, and we got the best result the company had ever seen. It predicted a $1 billion market. The company had never seen a $1 billion market before, so they didn't believe it. They walked away from it. And for 5 years, nothing really happened. But every so often, management would ask, well, whatever happened to that mop? And eventually, there was just this pressure, and eventually, they said, well, let's go test that again, see if it works. And eventually, they put it into market, went into the market at $75 US in France and in Canada, and everybody just bought it off the shelves. They couldn't keep up with it. They didn't believe it, so now they had to catch up with the manufacturing. And make a long story short, they struggled for about really another 5-10 years, and we're now a $1 billion market. Okay, so that's a story of a success. There's a little bit of difficulty in there, but I thought you might want to hear both sides of the story. So back to the Standish report. What they concluded was, why do projects fail? And these are the main reasons: is that you have incomplete requirements. Okay, it's probably that's the number one reason: lack of user involvement, lack of resources, unrealistic expectations, lack of executive support, your changing requirements and specifications, and your lack of planning, and you actually got it to market, and no one really wanted it anyway. So if you look at these two projects, you'll find that on both ends of this, there were some good and some bad on both of these. And I think the biggest difference is on the sprayer project was that the difference was experience. Okay, without me even knowing at the time when I did my first project, there wasn't any experience. We didn't know how to run a project, an innovation project. And by the time we got to the second project, we had developed some systems, and I already knew that I needed a multifunctional team in order to run that project. And I already knew that I needed to I needed to do some proactive planning up front, and I needed to get a plan in place before I started to move forward. And so it was at the time, it was actually unconscious. I didn't realize that I was doing this, but that was what I think helped make that project a success. So the real reason I came to talk was about how to improve project success. And there's a term out there called robustness. It's an engineering term. And it actually has a definition. It's, robustness equals 1 minus the probability of failure. And there's been quite a bit of research done that we know that how projects actually, or how they evolve. And usually they start off as a trial and error. You got to make it work, okay? Then we go to what we call steady state. Once you get into steady state, that's where you get things to run constantly and you keep your quality at the same level. And that's where Six Sigma and Lean and all those things come in. Then you have to deal with transient modeling. You need to continue to optimize and improve your system And then eventually you got to deal with the long-term changes. There's other things that are going to change in your system you got to deal with. There's cross-coupling effects, but that's where the robustness really starts to kick in. And at the very end of that, we call it design for Murphy. You basically coming up with any problem that would ever happen, you've got a solution for it, and that's at the very end. Now, the interesting thing about innovation is innovation systems seem to be running in the trial and error mode. As far as I know, I don't see anyone in a steady state. There aren't any constant systems that everybody uses all the time to run their projects. And what I wanted to show you is some of the different systems that are out there that could be possible that you might use to help run your projects. And they're all built around this concept of knowledge and innovation are linked, and you can't have one with the other. You get more knowledge, you get more innovation. You get more innovation, you get more knowledge. They're what we call synergistic. Now, one of the first systems that I thought I would show you is the Russian technology. They call this theory of inventive problem solving. That's actually that's English for the same word that's called TRIZ. TRIZ means that's the word in Russian for theory of inventive problem solving. And they have their process, and it starts with, first of all, you want to define the issues or define the problem. You need to do a little laddering up, what we call. You need to do some brainstorming, look at different ideas. You need to eventually do some analysis and start to narrow back down. You need to then do some what ifs and use some tools to find out, well, what are other possibilities that you could use. You need to select some techniques that might work for you, and then project what you're going to do and actually focus and turn it into a product. So that's the TRIZ methodology, and they have a pretty large toolkit. Now, back to Proctor, we didn't have any systems in Proctor either. This was all what we call tacit knowledge. It was in people's heads, but no one had ever taken it and turned it into a system that other people could use. This is actually a website after I left Proctor. Within the first year I was gone, we created this website that they call the Circle of Creativity. And it's actually, if you notice, it's got the same kind of system. Start with the center, and define the problem in the center, do some observation, analysis, discovery, a little bit of understanding, build your knowledge, find some connections, come up with your invention, and implement. Implementing is being most important, because if you don't implement it, it's not an innovation. Now, we launched this site, and about a year later, we found out we had a problem. People didn't know what we meant by define the problem. So we ended up building a companion site that basically is all about how to define the problem, and it just gets into what's your issue definition, where does it fit into to the overall scope of what you're doing, and we call that putting it in context. Again, doing your issues analysis, your problem statement. You got to get focused on where you're trying to head, and the big thing is to come up with some write-up that you can describe with your ideas in order to get buy-in and get people to want to go do your project. Now, if you notice, there's one thing I keep doing up here is that we focus on a problem and we diverge. Okay. Then what I do is I try to set some criteria, and then I want to narrow back down. And that's a basic element of innovation. And so, anytime you're working in the process, you start by looking for a problem, diverge, okay, set some criteria, and focus. Now, the interesting thing is what we've learned is you can't do all three at the same time. You can only do one at a time. And you actually have to change your time and place on each one of these. So if you're going to do this work, if you're going to be brainstorm one time, go away, do something else, come back, set your criteria, okay, go away, come back, and then focus down and have a focusing thing. So that people are using, their minds are set for what they're trying to do at that particular time. Now, and I just went through all that, so this is actually so this is built on a system that's been around for 60 years or so. I don't know if you've studied Osborne Parnes. this is a system called Creative Problem Solving Model. I actually have a big institute in Boston. It's a large group of people, and this is the process that they recommend for creative problem solving. But it starts with objective finding, data finding, then you want to do your problem finding and your solution finding and your acceptance finding. Notice there's one thing, a lot of people look at this and say, hey Sandy, that looks like a DNA molecule. And I say, yeah, that's basically it. You got to have all the DNA together or it doesn't work. But you notice that there's that same process going on in each one of those steps. Another thing we've done then is we've gone out and we've looked at, we do assessments on different people's style of working in an innovation system. And what we've discovered is that there are really 4 different groups of people. And we can actually give you this assessment and you can do your own self-assessment on this, but there's what we call the generators. There's a group of people that are really good at coming up with new ideas that people have never even thought about, and they identify new problems that we might need to go work on. There's another group that we call the conceptualizers. They're the people that can take that new idea and start to put a little meat on the bones and start to define, what is the real problem that's within that and how do we solve them. Then there's another group that we call the optimizers, the ones that can narrow it down and perfect it a little bit. And at the very end, we have the implementers. You can't get by without those implementers because that's how we turn it into reality. Now, when we do our work, you can see that I laid this on top of that exact Osborne-Parn model. I just put it in a circle. And I've got the generators and the conceptualizers, the optimizers, and the implementers. But when we do our tests, and this is an amazing, interesting fact, we don't find very many generators. The generators somehow are weeded out of our system. In the universities, in business, we just don't find those people. They're hard to find. Now, we know they're out there because we know there's a lot of creative people in the world, but for some reason, they're not in the universities and they're not in the business world. So we have to find a way to get those people back in. And then where we find most of the people are over here on the implementer side. So lots of implementers, but not many of the generators. So it's kind of interesting. So in general, where we're coming out on all this is there is a systematic innovation process. If you think about it, what we got is the problem that we're trying to solve in the middle, and then we do a definition, select, solve, and evaluate. But we go through this process many, many times over the life of a project. So we know these systems work, and everybody expects it's going to happen the first time, but in reality, it's really an iterative process. It takes a lot of work to put these together. So anyway, this is my definition on how to improve your project success. And if I were going to give you this is what I would tell you is begin by defining the problem that needs to be solved. It's amazing to me when I go work for companies and individuals who are hiring us to do the work that most people haven't spent the time to actually define the problem that they're trying to work on. The next thing to do is go out into the global database and look for, information around your problem, okay? Right, today it's very easy to go look. I had a conversation at lunch talking about going out and looking at the patent databases. Patent databases are available to everyone, they're online. You can go out there and look today to see if there's an idea that's already there that could actually solve your problem. Now, once you go out there and look at that information, you're going to go through a couple of iterations because you're going to begin to say, well, I need to redefine my problem based on what I learned. And then you're going to do, then what you need to do is take a big leap. And this is, I think, one of the harder things. You need to think about your problem and say, what would be ideal? If it didn't cost me anything and it was something I could do right away, what would be most ideal? And most people don't want to do that for some reason because what they want to do is say, well, no, I can only think about the things I know I can do. But the truth is, if you can think about what's ideal, get way out there, as far out there as you possibly can go, and then step backwards and say, well, okay, I can't get to my ideal, but maybe I could do this. Well, no, I can't do that. Well, maybe I could do this, step back. And maybe I can't do that, but it's something close, and all at once, wow, I could do this right now. Okay, and that's the way you solve your problems. Now, what it's also done for you is giving you where to look in the future, because in the future, you'll know what's coming next, and you'll be able to move into the future. So that's we call that concept backwards chaining. You want to identify similar problems that's out there in the world that, the truth is somebody somewhere else has probably already solved your problem. If you can get down to the level of, well, what is your problem? You can go out there and look and say, well, where else might somebody have already done that? So that's how inventors really do their work. Inventors pull information from everywhere. They make connections. And when they put them together, that's where the inventions really lie. And then you have to go through a verification program. You got to find out, well, was my idea any good? So how do I verify that I'm right? And you got to look for continuous improvement. I pulled this slide, and I thought this would be important. This is again from that report I talked about from the Center for Competitiveness, the U.S. study that was about 2 years of research. But I don't know if this is appropriate for the university, but I thought I put it in for this because it's really about what I call a national innovation ecosystem. When you're putting your systems, you need to have a systems approach on how you're going to go about putting your innovation program together. And you need to think about a few things. So, at the top, you're looking for, well, I want trying to drive wealth and improve the overall community. I've got my innovation inputs. I've got my creativity, my research, my knowledge, and my information. I've got to have my innovation policy, and I've got to have my strategy and my processes and my insights. And over there, you got to have demand. We talked about push-pull. And if you go out there and look at what's already out there and there's a demand for it, you have a much higher probability of getting something to be successful if you can innovate to the things that people are looking for. And then you need an infrastructure, you need talent and the investment. And I think that's the thing about the universities and the government and trying to put and business together to work together to try to put some system together that they can work with. And what I'm finding out is there aren't a lot of people looking at this from a systems point of view. So that's really what I'm trying to get across. The one thing I want to mention, the change in innovation systems in general. For some reason, most people think that innovation is really an individual sport. Only individuals innovate. And that's no longer true. The reality is that it's not invention, it's actually innovation. Innovation it's not a linear process where you go one step, two step, three step. It's actually very dynamic, working with very large groups of people. It used to be we in business, and this when I was at Procter, this was true, we had forecasts, and we knew, well, if we could only go do this, we would end up with this much business at the end. If we could invent to this place, we would get that. But in reality, we have to actually sense where the response to demand. We have to be in responding to the demand that's coming at us, and that's again your idea of pull versus push. No longer independent. We're working as interdependent teams. It's not a single discipline. It's multidisciplinary. There's a product. It used to be we thought of it as a product function, but we really want to think about it from the consumer side. We think about local R&D teams, but in reality, they're really global teams. So you have to have systems in place that allow you to work with these large global networks of people that are doing the work. So in my mind, it really comes down to leadership, okay? And what I actually am here doing is some workshops on how to put the leadership together to really what I call hold the pieces of this fragile thing together. And when I think about them as rocks, and what you have is you got to have you have to have a purpose, you got to have a place, you got to have the people, you got to have a process, and you got to have the knowledge and the tools to get the job done. And you need some leadership to hold those things together. And those are the systems that I'm talking about trying to put in place. The program that I'm working on right now is what I call the 4 Ps of innovation. Basically the same thing. You got people, I think it starts with people. Nothing was ever invented without a person. People are the people that, people are who do the work. You need a purpose. You need to know where you're going. You need a vision. You need processes, and those are all those tools that I was showing you, all these different systems that we might want to use. We need to come to some common understanding and a common language about what we think those systems are. And then at the very end, what most people forget is you need a place to do the work. for some reason, we never give people a place to work, okay? And you were talking earlier about starting to give people a place where they have to run their business and you make it a requirement, and that's really a good thing, is they need a place to do the work, and it's, again, bounded by your knowledge and your leadership, and I think that's what leads to innovation. And then I'm willing to take questions, and I won't be staying for the question and answer later on because I actually have to go to another location. So, any questions? Sure.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Ping.
Thank you.
I got only one question. Can you elaborate what would be the culture of innovation like in those days in the Procter and Gamble? Do you have 15% rule, like staff are allowed to work 50% of their time on their own project for the sake of the company or something like that? Thank you.
Right, that's a good question. Actually, there's a lot of people talking about that right now, and there's a belief that you can't have innovators and what we call sustaining workers working at the same time. And one of the problems you have is that you need a different mindset in order to be doing innovation work. And if you're trying to work in a sustaining projects and have part of your time devoted to running the business and another part of your time trying to do breakthrough innovation, it typically doesn't work. So what we found is that you actually have to separate it somehow. And it really comes down to leadership again. You need leaders who understand this 4Ps process that I was talking about and know how to manage and hold this fragile innovation network, or whatever you want to call it, this pieces of the puzzle together, and to nurture it and keep it going. And we talk about incubators. So, a lot of times they talk about the most successful innovation projects actually happen. They call them skunk works. And if you really, if you do some research and look on where the successful projects that were breakthroughs, you'll usually find it was some skunk works team that did something on the side and sometimes kept it under the radar for a long, long time until they brought it up. So, so I guess I don't know if I'm helping answer your question, but I think you have to do them separate. I think you really have to have separate management and separate leadership to make it happen. I haven't discovered the other way yet. So, any other questions? Yes.
Okay, Mr. Ping.
Yes.
Okay, out of your 47 patents, how many of them are actually generating income?
How much of them?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I like that one. Well, interestingly, a good portion of those are around the Swiffer wet jet, and so it's if you break because the way this works out is people don't realize that there isn't just one patent on one product or one that whole thing wasn't one patent. It was actually many different patents. Okay, and not only was it many different patents for how we built the assembly, if you want to think about it, of how this thing was actually made, but it was also all the international patents that we had to file in order to be able to sell our products outside the U.S. So we talked about how you get things in other countries. So I would say at least half of those are making money right now, in my case, which is not normal. The Swiffer wet jet is $1 billion market. It actually, we employ, it created a whole new division. They've got about 2,500 people that didn't have jobs that now have jobs, not counting all the manufacturing and all the other work that's going on all over the world as they produce the materials. And the Cascade Action Packs is right around $300 million. So those are the successes. But we blew a lot of money too. I've wasted a lot of money too. So you have to balance the success and failure. So does that help? Does that help? Any other questions? I like answering questions. All right. If that's it, if you feel free, I don't think I put my email address on the thing, so I'll give it to you. It's real simple. It's Sandy, S-A-N-D-Y, P-I-N-G, it's my name, at wow, W-O-W, numeral 2, N-O-W.com. So it's wow to now. We want to bring it from the wow to the now. That's what we do. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ping.